Some kids grow up in houses where the walls are blank or filled with family photos spread evenly among siblings. In our house, the walls were practically a shrine to my sister. Celeste, framed certificates, honor roll ribbons, art projects she'd brought home from elementary school. Every square foot seemed to celebrate something she'd done. There wasn't a single space that reflected me, unless you counted the occasional group picture where I stood off to the side. Celeste was older by 7 years, and in those years she'd claimed the role of family star. Mom and Dad called her our achiever, our bright one, or simply our pride and joy. I didn't even get a nickname. I was just Marissa. I wore her clothes after she outgrew them, whether they fit or not, every winter. A new coat would arrive for Celeste, and her old one buttons hanging by threads. Sleeves frayed would end up in my closet. Birthdays meant gifts that were practical, which usually translated to something Celeste had used before. A backpack with ink stains from her high school days. A bike with peeling paint and a seat worn thin from years of her rides. At school, I learned to keep quiet. Teachers who'd had Celeste before me would beam and say, "Oh, you're her sister. She was so talented." I'd smile, nod, and never mention that I didn't share her knack for science fairs or spelling bees. Even our dinner conversations revolved around her, if she had a soccer game. We all discussed her goals, if she'd aced a test. It became the centerpiece of the evening. If I'd had a good day. It might get a polite, "That's nice," before the conversation veered back to Celeste's plans for the weekend. I didn't realize how much I'd faded into the background until one afternoon in middle school. I brought home a drawing I'd worked on for weeks, my first attempt at charcoal shading. I left it on the kitchen counter, hoping Mom might frame it or at least hang it on the fridge. That night, when I came back for a glass of water, it was gone. I found it later in the recycling bin, folded in half, sitting under a stack of junk mail. I never said a word. By then, I'd already learned the truth in our house. My needs and achievements came second, always, and that truth only became sharper the day Celeste announced she was getting married. Celeste announced her engagement on a Sunday afternoon. Sweeping into the living room like she'd stepped out of a bridal magazine, Jack proposed. She squealed, holding up her hand so the diamond could catch every bit of light. Mom gasped, tears already welling up, while Dad slapped Jack on the back like he'd just been inducted into some secret club. I sat on the edge of the couch, smiling faintly, waiting for someone to acknowledge me. Celeste eventually turned and said, "You'll be my bridesmaid." "Right," I nodded. "Of course. Congratulations." In the weeks that followed, the wedding became the family's entire universe. Fabric swatches, cake tastings, endless conversations about venues. Our dining table disappeared under glossy magazines and color charts. One night, coming home late from my part-time job at the coffee shop, I heard Mom and Dad in the kitchen, voices low. "We'll have to take out a loan." Dad said, "I know," Mom replied, her tone resigned but determined. "But it's Celeste's big day. We can't let her down." The words lodged in my chest. A loan for flowers and chair covers and a dress she'd wear once. I thought about my own savings account, barely enough for textbooks next semester, and bit my tongue. My opinions didn't carry much weight here. The wedding day arrived like a page ripped from a luxury bridal catalog. Celeste floated down the aisle in lace and satin, looking every bit the princess. Our parents beamed from the front row, their smiles wide enough to split their faces. I stood in the background, holding my bouquet, smiling when the photographer pointed the camera my way. No one saw the way my feet ached in the heels I'd bought secondhand, or how small I felt compared to the grandeur surrounding her. By the time the reception ended, the decision had already been made for me, whatever the cost. They would always find a way to give Celeste more. And that truth deepened a few months later, when she announced she was expecting twins. Celeste made her next announcement over Sunday dinner, placing her hands on her stomach with a dramatic pause. "We're having twins," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. Mom nearly dropped the serving spoon, and Dad's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Two babies." Mom clapped her hands. We'll have to start looking for a bigger house for you right away. I blinked. A bigger house. They'll need the space, Dad explained, already launching into a list of neighborhoods. We can help with the down payment. That colonial near the park just came on the market perfect for kids. I stared at my plate, trying to process the fact that they were ready to shell out thousands of dollars for a second home when they were still paying off Celeste's wedding. The knot in my chest tightened, but I swallowed my frustration. A few weeks later, after the house purchase was finalized, I decided to bring up my own needs. I've been looking at colleges, I said cautiously over breakfast. I'd like to apply this fall. Could you help with tuition? They exchanged a glance I'd seen 100 times before, the one that meant the answer would come with conditions. Well, Dad said, we can probably cover half. With the loan for the wedding and helping with the house, money's tight. Half. The same parents who'd just written a check for Celeste's dream home could only spare half for my education. I managed a small thanks before retreating to my room, the walls closing in tighter than ever. That fall, I enrolled in the local community college, the only option I could afford. To cover the rest, I took a job waitressing at a diner on the edge of town. My days blurred into lectures, late-night shifts, and aching feet. And just when I thought I'd found a rhythm, Celeste started showing up on weekends with the twins in tow. The first time Celeste showed up unannounced. It was a Saturday afternoon. I'd just finished a grueling week of midterms and double shifts at the diner. My plan was simple sleep, maybe catch up on laundry, and not speak to anyone unless I had to. Instead, the doorbell rang, and there she was, twins on each hip, diaper bag hanging off her shoulder. You're a lifesaver. Marissa, she said before I could even open my mouth. Jack and I haven't had a date night in forever. We'll be back in a few hours. I started to protest, but she was already halfway down the front steps. That few hours turned into 6, and by the time they returned, my apartment looked like a tornado had passed through. Celeste scooped up the boys, kissed their cheeks, and breezed out the door without so much as a thank you. It didn't stop there. Soon, every weekend became a repeat performance. Sometimes she'd give me 10 minutes warning. Other times, I'd come home from work to find the twins already inside. My mom letting herself in with the spare key. This is what family does, she'd say, handing me a sippy cup as if that settled it. Besides, it's good practice for when you have your own kids. I wanted to scream. I was barely keeping my head above water lectures during the day, waitressing at night, and mountains of homework in between. My social life was non-existent. Friends eventually stopped inviting me out because my answer was always the same. I can't. I'm babysitting. The resentment grew quietly at first, tucked between folding tiny clothes and reheating chicken nuggets. But by the 3rd month, it was a constant hum in the back of my mind. No one asked if I wanted to help. No one offered to swap weekends or give me a break. I was a built-in babysitter. Nothing more. And no matter how exhausted I was, the expectation never changed. By the time I realized I couldn't keep living like this, I was already making plans for my first real break in years a short, cheap trip that I hoped would finally be mine alone. By the time spring rolled around, I was running on fumes. My days blurred into a relentless loop of classes, diner shifts, and weekend babysitting marathons. The thought of a break felt almost dangerous, like if I stopped moving, I might not be able to start again. One night, after my shift ended, I sat in the corner booth with my phone and a cup of stale coffee, scrolling through budget travel sites. I found a rundown but charming hotel in a nearby city, walking distance from a museum I'd always wanted to visit. 3 nights, ocean view if you leaned far enough over the balcony, and just barely within my price range. I booked it before I could talk myself out of it. When I told my parents, they actually seemed supportive. Good for you, honey, Mom said, smiling like she'd just discovered I was capable of independent thought. You deserve some time to yourself. I should have known better. The first day of my trip, I stepped off the bus with my overnight bag and a rare lightness in my chest. The hotel was exactly as described: faded carpet, squeaky doors, but clean. I dropped my bag on the bed and headed out for lunch at a little cafe, savoring every moment of silence. When I returned, voices echoed down the hall, familiar voices. My stomach sank. Surprise. Mom beamed as she stepped out of the room next to mine. Celeste was behind her, the twins squirming in her arms. "What are you doing here?" I managed. "Oh, we thought it would be fun to make it a family trip," Celeste said, already nudging the boys toward me. "They've been dying to see the city. Jack and I want to explore a bit, maybe grab dinner. You don't mind watching them, do you?" Before I could answer, Mom chimed in. "We'll be back soon," and they disappeared down the hallway. The next 48 hours were a nightmare. The twins tore through my small hotel room like they were competing for destruction points. They pulled the curtains down, shattered 2 glasses, and somehow managed to flush a plastic toy down the toilet, which resulted in a plumbing bill I had to cover before checking out. By the time they left, I was more exhausted than when I'd arrived. My so-called escape had turned into another weekend of unpaid childcare, only now it had cost me money I didn't have. On the bus ride home, one thought kept looping in my head: something had to change. The morning after my vacation, I woke up in my own bed feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My muscles ached from chasing the twins around, and my bank account balance sat in the double digits after paying for the hotel damages. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the weight of every unpaid hour, every hijacked weekend pressing down. By the time I walked into the kitchen, the decision had already settled in my chest. Mom was making coffee, Dad flipping through the paper. Celeste's latest text, another babysitting request, lit up my phone. I turned it face down. "I'm moving out," I said. Mom's head snapped up. "What? Don't be ridiculous. I'm serious. I've been looking for places. I found one I can afford with a roommate. You can't just leave," she said, her voice rising. "Who's going to help your sister with the twins?" "Her husband," I shot back. Dad set his paper down, his jaw tightening. "If you walk out, don't expect us to keep paying for school. You'll be on your own." I felt my pulse in my ears, but the fear that used to keep me in place wasn't there this time. "Then I'll be on my own." The conversation ended with slammed cabinet doors and the kind of silence that's louder than shouting. 2 weeks later, I was hauling my life into a second-floor walk-up across town. The place smelled faintly of old paint and dust, but it was mine or ours, technically, since my roommate, Tasha, was already stacking her moving boxes in the living room. I picked up extra shifts at the diner to cover rent, sacrificing what little free time I had. The exhaustion was bone deep. My meals were whatever I could heat in a microwave at midnight, and my bed was a mattress on the floor. But no one knocked on my door with 2 toddlers in tow. No one made me feel like my time belonged to them. Every morning, I woke up knowing I'd bought myself something that had never been handed to me choice. And, for the first time, I started to wonder what my life might look like if I built it entirely for me. 2 years after I'd left home, I crossed the stage at graduation to the sound of polite applause from strangers. I scanned the crowd instinctively. Even though I knew no one from my family was there, the seat I'd reserved stayed empty, my name echoing in the auditorium without a familiar voice to catch it. When the ceremony ended, I took photos with classmates, forcing a smile for the camera. The pride I felt was real, but it came with an ache one I knew would never fully go away. A week later, I accepted an entry-level position at a small marketing firm downtown. The pay wasn't spectacular, but it was enough to let me move out of the shared apartment and into a place that was completely mine. My new home was a studio with creaky floorboards, chipped cabinets, and a view of the alley behind a bakery. I loved it instantly, with weekends finally mine. I started exploring nearby towns, hopping on buses to places I'd only read about. I walked farmers' markets, hiked short trails, and lingered in used bookstores without worrying about when I had to be back. The absence of constant demands was almost startling. At first, I'd catch myself waiting for the phone to ring, for someone to ask me to drop everything and watch the twins. But as the months passed, the silence became something I treasured. Celeste still called occasionally, usually with a request disguised as a casual check-in. I kept the conversations short, always citing work or prior plans. My parents and I spoke even less. The distance between us wasn't just physical anymore, it was a kind of buffer I'd built to protect myself. For the first time, my days were mine to fill, and I didn't realize how fiercely I valued that until my 25th birthday, when they showed up with a gift that threatened to pull me right back in. My 25th birthday was low-key just dinner plans with a few friends at a neighborhood restaurant a week before. Mom called, her voice unusually bright. "We want you to come over on your birthday," she said. "The whole family will be here. We have something special for you." Against my better judgment, I went. When I walked into their living room, the twins were chasing each other around the coffee table, Celeste and Jack chatting with my parents like nothing had changed. After cake and small talk, Mom handed me a large envelope. "This," she said, smiling like she'd just handed me a winning lottery ticket, "is from all of us." Inside was a glossy packet for an all-expenses-paid trip to another city. The highlight 2 nights in a hotel and tickets to a massive outdoor concert. "We leave in 3 weeks," Dad announced. "It'll be so much fun, all of us together." Celeste leaned in, grinning. "The boys are going to love it. It'll be great for them to have you there. Jack and I might sneak away to explore the city a bit." There it was, the real reason. I could already picture the weekend me stuck in a hotel room, trying to corral 2 sugar-charged 8-year-olds while everyone else enjoyed the show. I smiled just enough to pass for grateful, "Wow, that's generous." What they didn't know was that 2 weeks earlier, I'd bought my own ticket to a completely different destination, a quiet coastal town a few states away, where the loudest thing I'd hear would be waves hitting the shore. My plan had been set long before this gift appeared. Now, it had just taken on an extra layer of satisfaction. I closed the envelope, thanked them all, and let them believe they'd just given me the best present of my life. In 3 weeks, we'd all go to the airport together, only I wouldn't be getting on their plane. The morning of the trip, I met them at the airport curbside. Mom was buzzing with energy, Dad juggling suitcases, Celeste and Jack already talking about all the sightseeing they'd do. The twins clung to their backpacks, and I could feel their expectant eyes on me. As we moved toward the check-in line, I put a hand to my stomach. "I'm just going to run to the restroom," I said casually. "You go ahead and get checked in. I'll meet you at the gate." They nodded, distracted by luggage tags and boarding passes. I turned down the concourse, my steps quickening until I reached another terminal. The sign for my gate coastal town. Boarding in 30 minutes was the most beautiful thing I'd seen in months. At the counter, I handed over my ID and my real ticket. No one called after me. No one stopped me. Within minutes, I was sliding into my seat by the window, the quiet hum of the plane a stark contrast to the chaos I'd just left behind. Before switching off my phone, I typed a single message to Mom. "I'm not coming with you. Enjoy your trip." The response was immediate angry texts, voicemails, my name in all caps. I didn't read past the first few lines. The words selfish and ungrateful blurred together until they meant nothing. A flight attendant offered me champagne, and I accepted. As the plane taxied, I sipped slowly, watching the runway stretch ahead. The knot in my chest began to loosen. By the time we lifted into the air, the airport was a memory, and for the first time in years, so was the weight of their expectations. That week was everything I'd imagined: morning walks along the shore, afternoons exploring small shops, evenings lingering over dinners without watching the clock. I met people whose only expectations were to share a laugh or a conversation. No demands, no obligations. When I returned, the calm didn't last long. 2 days later, there was pounding at my door. Mom and Celeste stormed in, voices sharp, accusing me of ruining their trip and abandoning my responsibilities. I let them talk until the noise became one continuous blur. "I don't owe you anything," I said finally, my voice even. "Not my time, not my money, and definitely not my weekends. If you want childcare, hire someone. I'm not it." They stared at me, stunned. As I walked to the door and opened it, "You can leave now, within a month." I'd signed a lease on a new apartment in a different part of town. I didn't give them my address. My time filled with work, painting classes, and planning my next trip this time without a secret exit strategy. The door between us had finally closed. Whether it stayed locked or not was no longer up to them.